Okay. All right. Let me start this off then. Hey guys, finally we have Brien Foerster with us today on Social Info Radio in association with QD Ministries, and I'm so happy to have you with us, Brien. It's been a long time coming, but we're finally here now, and I'm just super excited with what you got to share with us. So how are you doing, sir?
Actually, I'm doing very well. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Okay, now I've been doing so much research on what you've been doing in terms of the elongated skulls and living in Peru. Now I've had LA Marzulli, and again I've had him on my show quite a few times, and it's led me to you, where you've also gone into a lot of research and stuff like that. So that's just a brief history about me and how I got onto this journey. So I'm really interested to hear how you started, how you found yourself to where you are now, and where you see this all going in the future.
Well, I've been fascinated by ancient, mysterious places since I was a small child, as in most children are.
Yeah.
Like who built the Sphinx? How old is it? Was there an Atlantis? Is the Bible a correct account of historical record? Etc., etc. And I saw the elongated skulls on TV. Basically in alien programs, but it was about 10 years ago that I was able to start seeing them in person in museums here in Peru. And the strange thing is that if you look up on the internet, almost no archaeologists are studying them at all. And I found that very, very strange, because some of the skull shapes look very natural. They don't look like they're simple head binding. They look like these people were born that way. So the question is that true? And that's where we're at now in terms of bringing a lot of doctors and other medical professionals to look at them. And all of them are quite bewildered. They say, I don't know what that is, I don't know if that's a human being, etc.
Sure. We lost you a little bit there where it sort of slowed down, but that's just the connection, I presume so. But anyway, you're back now, so yeah. Everything seems to have leveled itself out. But yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. Okay, we've got a message just coming up, internet connection, right? Okay, all right. So just going into, obviously, you explained you had a fascination with this since you was a child. I mean, am I right in presuming you are originally from America? I know Peru is sort of South America and stuff like that, but was that where you sort of grew up and grown all your life in Peru? Or what? If that's not the case, what led you there?
Well, I grew up in the U.S. and Canada.
Right.
Peru fascinated me because I had more or less completed my interest in Native American studies and Hawaiian and Polynesian studies, and I just decided to visit Peru to see what the country was like. And there's so much ancient history here that it immediately grabbed my fascination.
Okay, cool. So I take it that you decided to move there and live there now, are you?
Yes.
All right, excellent. All right, so you can be closer to where the action's happening, right?
That's right. I'm about half an hour drive from one of the major ancient cemeteries.
Wow.
So it's all here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so in terms of your time living in Peru and stuff like that, I mean, I realized that you're a researcher in Peru and Bolivia. That's where you started. Is that correct? Okay,
yeah.
Okay, great. So I know you've sort of gone into the Inca elongated skulls, which were found in Peru. What's your comparison to? Are they the same as Nephilims, or would you say they're different?
Well, at this point we can't tell because we have analyzed 4 DNA samples.
Right.
And the interesting thing is they all point to origins in Europe or the Middle East. So no Native American DNA has shown up, which is very strange. So that's why we're going to conduct more major DNA investigations with L.A. Marzulli of probably 10 to 15 different skulls quite soon.
Oh, excellent. Okay, and that's led on to the next question, the DNA of these skulls. So it's pinpointing that they're actually from Europe, are they? The DNA is leading to that.
Yeah, Europe/the Middle East. It's that broad area there.
All right. Okay. All right. That's interesting. So, with the DNA of the Nephilim skulls, where do they sort of range from in comparison to the ones in Peru?
Well, as far as I know, no one has been able to find a true Nephilim skull to analyze yet. That could be the result of governmental cover-up, I'm not sure. But one of the samples suggested Syria, which is more or less the area where the Nephilim were, supposedly existed.
In biblical accounts.
Syria, exactly. Well, Mount Hermon specifically. So that's why LA is going down that road. He thinks that these could be the descendants of the Nephilim.
Excellent. Okay, good stuff. So Easter Island, I've realized that you've written a book on Easter Island. I haven't had much time to actually go into that. But the name Easter, being that I'm, from biblical cloth and believe in the biblical accounts very much, Easter Island sort of is intriguing to me. Can you share a bit more on that?
Yeah. Well, Easter Island is fascinating because it's very small. It's 5 miles by 7 miles by 10 miles in size. The nearest major landmass is more than 2,000 miles away, so even trying to find it is difficult. But what we figured out is the Polynesians have likely been there for 2,000 years, but other people lived there before them, and they had red hair, just as the Paracas on the coast had red hair, and that's a genetic characteristic. That's not Polynesian or Native American.
Sure. Okay. All right. So, I mean, again, they have elongated skulls, do they? These,
They did in the past.
Right. Okay. So, in terms of some of the building structures and stuff like that you found there, I mean, did they have any sort of pyramids or anything like that? Or is it more sort of square, sort of block shaped, building structures that you found?
On Easter Island?
Yeah.
Well, there are, we found evidence of at least 5 sites that are older than Polynesian, and they were made with very advanced technology, like we find in the highlands of Peru. Also, there are 900 of the famous Moai heads, but each one of those stone heads is the complete body. It's just they're buried up to their necks.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to dig to actually, unearth the rest of it, or?
Some people have. Thor Heyerdahl was the first to do that in the 1950s. He's the one who discovered that. They just decided to dig down where one of these heads was protruding, and they found that it was, I think, 30 to 40 feet tall. It's huge stone monument.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, I mean, in terms of like trying to, I would only presume it's not as easy to sort of like, go to somewhere like that and start digging to unravel and find, whatever you could find underneath the earth to some of these things. So what's the process like to actually get permission to be able to do that? Is it easy or?
Oh, it's incredibly difficult. They are doing excavations right now inside the crater, which is where the stone is. Again, digging down below these heads and finding complete bodies. But that's done through a very complex process. You basically have to be a PhD archaeologist, which I'm not.
Right.
And then it takes months or years for the paperwork to get done. So what I do is I monitor what other people are doing more than anything else.
Sure. All right. Okay. All right. Great. Sounds good. So, Machu Picchu, I hope I'm doing justice to the pronunciation of the words. Can you explain a bit more about what that is and what that's all about?
Yeah, Machu Picchu was a ceremonial city of the Inca located in the high jungle. Conventional archaeologists say that it was built probably in 25 years, but it's so massive that there's no way that that's the case. We found that the center of it is ancient megalithic, and that the Inca found it, and then they built a city around a more ancient megalithic series of structures.
Oh, right, okay. All right, interesting. And do any of these have sort of writings or inscriptions on the wall and stuff like that, or is it just mainly plain sort of blocks of building blocks?
Yeah, it's a very complex assembly of massive stones.
Right, okay.
All found at the site itself, but some of these stones weigh 30, 40 tons, and there's no way that a Bronze Age civilization like the Inca could have cut these blocks and put them together, because the precision baffles modern-day stonemasons.
Sure. How precise it is.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Okay, excellent. Now, I mean, in Egypt, there are sort of, as people say, there's writings on the wall. So it tells a story. It gives a history of what Egypt was about. So I suppose, in a sense, it makes it easy for us to understand who they were, how they lived, because it's sort of written on the wall. Have you come across any of that type of inscription in Peru, or I don't know if you've been down to Mexico yet, but have you come across stuff like that?
Yeah, actually, there is a system of hieroglyphics that the Inca used called tokapu, but it was only used by the royal family of the Inca, so the general public never knew what this stuff meant. And I just uncovered this about 5 years ago when I found a very small book that described this hieroglyphic writing system. Most archaeologists are unaware that it exists.
Oh, excellent. So you're able to sort of decode what some of these writings actually mean now?
Yeah, starting to.
Oh, that's excellent stuff. Okay, so I'll take it you're going to write a book on that as well, yeah?
It'll be part of a book, yeah.
All right, sounds good. I'll be looking forward to that. All right, great stuff. So we've got now you've also found vast underground tunnel networks in Peru as well and Bolivia. Have you had the opportunity now? I mean, if you're anything like me, I wouldn't go down there. But have you had the opportunity to actually venture down to some of these tunnel systems and actually see what's down there and where it leads to, or?
Unfortunately, the government has blocked off all the entrances. We do know the entry points of one, which is it's between 1 and 2 miles long. It might be much longer. But the government have sealed them off, and no one's allowed to excavate or explore them at this point.
Okay, all right. So obviously we can only go based on, I'll take it this is the information that the government is given where they've actually checked it out and see where it all leads, yeah?
Or archaeologists have done the discoveries and then asked the government to be able to explore them. They did find this one tunnel through ground-penetrating radar from an airplane about 5 years ago, I think.
All right, interesting. Okay. All right, well, I mean, that's it for me with my question. So if you've got anything you would like to elaborate on based on, I suppose you've been through Easter Island and Machu Picchu. I understand that you've got books written on them, so anybody that's listening to the show could always go ahead and actually, if you mention your website where they can actually get your books from, that'd be interesting.
Sure, it's www.hiddenincatours.com.
Ah, excellent. Okay. And I take it it's on normal booksellers like Amazon and another place like that as well, right?
Yeah, Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Ah, that's good stuff. All right. So guys, you've heard it. If you want to get your hands on some of these books, giving you some more information about the research in which Brien Foerster has actually done, then that's where you need to go. So Brien, in terms of, have you got anything coming up in the future that you're working on at the moment that you could probably share with some of the listeners?
Sure. Well, I think the important basic thing is my studies are Peru, Bolivia, Egypt, Polynesia, and starting to think about other parts of the Middle East. And it seems clear now that the historical Western archaeological record is very much missing a lot of things out, because in all of those locations we find stone structures that are older than conventional history. So, for example, when the Egyptians entered what we call Egypt, they in fact found the Great Pyramid in existence already there, as well as a series of tunnels under the Giza Plateau. So there was a more highly developed civilization that existed there before the dynastic Egyptians. So archaeologists have gotten that completely wrong, just as they've gotten the idea that the Inca built the city of Cusco from nothing wrong, because they actually found an abandoned, advanced stone city there. And we already talked about Easter Island. And I'm sure there are places in the Middle East that tell the same story. I believe also, I haven't been yet, but I believe Jerusalem as well is much, much older. I think it's older than the Canaanites. And the Israelites found, again, an abandoned city, especially in the area of the Wailing Wall and the much fought over Dome of the Rock. I think they're fighting over the Dome of the Rock because there's an incredible symbolism there. So you have three great religions all battling for this one site, and the question is why? And I think it's because of its incredible antiquity. Who the original builders were, I don't know, but we also have Baalbek in Lebanon that most archaeologists claim the Romans built from nothing. That's not true. They found, an abandoned megalithic site and built their temples on top of it.
Okay. What's your view then on the Great Flood? Do you believe an event like that actually happened?
There are oral traditions from more than 200 cultures around the world that talk about the Great Flood. And I think they're all talking fact. The timeline, I believe, is about 12,000 years ago. So again, that doesn't fit in with a lot of other accounts, but we have scientific evidence that there was a global cataclysm 12,000 years ago, and that the flood was actually the raising of the world's sea level by 300 feet. So that would have submerged some ancient civilizations and would have altered the landscape of the planet. That's also the subject of a recent book I wrote.
All right, excellent. So what would you agree then that in terms of preserving some of these artifacts, because I do know that even with other research and I believe they're called excavators, who's gone into various places around the world, and they've actually dug and they could find fossilized ancient animals and even shells and stuff like that, even plants where it's actually fossilized to a point where the actual plant itself, granted it's not an actual leaf, but it's fossilized leaf. Would you agree then, in order for that preservation to happen, it would have had to have taken a rather fast, dramatic event like a flooding to happen, where mud would then cover up these stuff, and then once the water then subsides and then the sun and everything else and it dries, which would be a perfect preservation in my understanding. Would you believe that could be some of the reasons why we today can find some of these artifacts and bones and stuff like that?
Yeah, but I come from a scientific background, so I think this has taken place over the course of millions and millions of years. It is possible that rapid events could happen not that long ago if the geological circumstances are right. So definitely, I think we live on a very complicated ancient planet that has a lot of mysteries that we're starting to uncover. And I think human history is far more complex than what we've been taught. I think high civilizations existed before us and crashed or collapsed due to cataclysmic events, and that's the kind of stuff that we're finding now.
All right, excellent. So going back to Egypt, because you feel, based on the, I'll take it the science, or the scientists have they've they've aged the actual stone or put an age on it in terms of when it was actually built, and it goes. Sorry.
Sorry, can you excuse me for a moment?
The doorbell. Of course, go ahead. Go ahead. No problem. No, that's fine. No problem. So, yeah, so in terms of, like, actually, I'll keep this going. Dating the actual rocks of the pyramids and stuff like that, because, again, a lot of my research and my interest started in ancient Egypt. And, especially with some of these complex graves where it's sort of dug underneath the pyramid, and you had all these various compartments which were literally built to confuse people who would try to go down there to find, obviously, the pharaohs and their gold and stuff like that. So are you saying then that they weren't built as graves, they were just built, and then the Egyptians came in and actually just taken residence, in a sense, with some of these places?
That's where the evidence is leading, because they say that the Great Pyramid was built about 4,500 years ago. At that time, the Egyptians were a Bronze Age culture. They didn't have steel. And so there's no way they could have cut the granite. You know, there are 80-ton blocks inside the Great Pyramid that are almost surgically smooth. So there's no way that the dynastic Egyptians could have cut that stone. And the Great Pyramid by itself, you know, there are three of them on the Giza Plateau. The Great Pyramid's 2.3 million multi-ton blocks. There's no, estimates are that if it was built as conventional archaeologists say in 25 years, it means one of those blocks would have to have been cut, moved, and set into place every 2 minutes. That's impossible. We would be very hard pressed to rebuild the Great Pyramid today. And we have electricity, helicopters, trucks,
cranes,
and stuff like that. So I've been in Egypt 4 times. I go there with the absolute experts in the area who live there. And I've been taken underground 3 levels under the Giza Plateau into a system of tunnels. And there's no way that tunnel system was made by a Bronze Age culture. They had to have found it, and they did use some of the chambers, of course, as tombs. They carved hieroglyphics and painted all sorts of stuff, and then buried their people there. It's a lot easier to use, an already cut tomb or tomb than it is to make it in the first place.
Sure. So who do you think actually made these things then? Do you think that it was humans, or what do you think actually done it?
That's the problem, is that we don't know. We don't have a trace of their skeletons, a trace of where they lived. The Egyptians were obsessed with record keeping. They accounted for how many bushels of wheat were grown, how much beer was made, and, populations of goats, but they have no references to the Great Pyramid's construction, which is weird, because it's one of the greatest accomplishments of humanity. So that's, I will not say that aliens did it, but I can't say aliens didn't. I have absolutely no idea. I just know that it's so sophisticated, as well as the megalithic works in the highlands of Peru, that you're talking about a very advanced civilization or different civilizations.
Sure. But, I mean, you find these sort of works happening all over the world. Over here in the UK, we have Stonehenge. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to visit there. But, I mean, the actual building blocks of Stonehenge, those big, massive rocks, just lifting it, I don't think there is even a crane that can actually lift that today. Yeah? How big they are. Well, probably is, but, You know,
Yeah,
it's
there is, but and the location, the bluestones of Stonehenge come from Wales, which is a fair distance. England's not a huge country, but that's still a great undertaking. Then also when you take into account the weather that you have, which tends to rain,
yeah,
then you have soggy ground, and you're trying to move these things on tree trunks. Stonehenge is actually quite small in comparison to the works in Egypt and Peru. There are stones in this one wall called Sacsayhuaman in Cusco that weigh 125 tons.
wow,
And the landscape is very mountainous, and there are no native trees that grow in the area that grow straight or of any size, so you can't use them as rollers, so that's why it's a great mystery.
right. And so where it is so mountainous, they've literally cut rocks out of these mountains to build what they're building, have they? Or
they have,
yeah.
And actually, probably the most extreme example is there's another site called Ollantaytambo, and it has 6 stones that average about 60 tons apiece, and they fit precisely together. The quarry is across the valley and on top of the mountain,
Right.
and there's no road that goes there. So how those were moved is another quandary.
Mystery. Okay, so we haven't got to the understanding now of maybe how they came about, but have you heard of ley lines?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you believe that may have played a part in the structure of actually building those structures?
It could be. It could be the natural underground currents of the earth that was utilized. A lot of these things were built on ley lines. For example, of course, the Michael and Mary lines in England that have a lot of the ancient sacred sites on them. There's also a line called the Path of Viracocha that goes through Peru from northwest to southeast, and almost every megalithic site is built exactly or very close to that energy line. So energy and giant blocks of stone that can naturally conduct energy go hand in hand.
Sure. Now, I don't know if you've read the Book of Enoch, but
no, I haven't. I want to.
I would definitely encourage you to read that. I thought LA would have sort of introduced you to that a long time ago, but in the Book of Enoch, it talks about these ancient fallen angels, but what they are, they're basically giants. Now, I believe that these things that were built around the world were built by giants. Now, some of these giants are 22, 23 feet tall, but these are the things that we found. Yeah, the measurements of skeletons that's been reported to have been found, should I say, rather. So, could that not be maybe a good indication of how these things were built? Because if you've got, guys today, yeah, stretching 22, 23 feet tall, and obviously massive, big guys, yeah? Not only that, but we also got to understand it's not necessarily just their physical stature or strength. In Egypt, they had, they made their own battery, yeah, which they found and stuff like that. And there are actually, really high sort of like technological things carved on the walls in terms of like there were discs which could be presumed as being flying saucers. Yeah. Now, whether the Egyptians or the people before them inscribed that on the wall, but wherever this technology came from would be, to me, an answer to how these things got built, because I tend to think we are now moving into a modern technological era, but it's been unraveled that there has been a lot of technology that's been lost. So, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I'm hardly a biblical scholar, though it does fascinate me. I've been to Lebanon. I've seen Mount Hermon. I was introduced to that by LA. That supposedly is where the fallen angels descended and created the Nephilim. And if you look at someone who would be angelic, their powers would be way beyond us.
Absolutely.
You're talking about being your next level to God.
Sure.
So their mental power, spiritual power, physical power would be profoundly beyond what we have or likely ever had. So that is a possibility. I'm not denying for a moment that the Nephilim didn't exist. I'm just waiting for more data in order to substantiate the claim.
Sure.
But for example, Baalbek in Lebanon is very close to Mount Hermon, so that could have been a so-called Nephilim construction.
Sure.
The blocks there are 1,200 tons.
Yeah.
That we have no crane to lift or move. There's no way people were cutting these and pushing them along the ground into place. So it is plausible. I'm still very closely tied with Ellie as regard to this, and I very much support. Well, I can't say I support his theory, but I very much listen to his theory because he's looking at it from one angle, and I'm looking at it from not a completely different angle, but from a different angle. And what I'm watching to see is how the information corresponds to what both he and I, think.
Sure. I mean, in the book of Enoch, it actually speaks about the fact that these angels taught men how to make weapons. Yeah. But then if they also taught them how to make weapons, they would also have taught them how to make tools. So, I mean, I don't know the actual dating of when the book of Enoch was written and at the time it was written about. But, I mean, I can only presume, I mean, it was definitely way before the flood. So, you're talking from, from Genesis up to maybe Noah. So that within that time frame was thousands of years. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a possibility that there's a lot of things that hasn't been unraveled yet. So, one thing that I do understand is, yes, we have a hell of a lot of technology today, but it's evident that if we don't have a crane that can lift that block of stone that you just mentioned, then we obviously are not as advanced as we think we are. Yeah.
Well, yeah. The problem is that we're taught that 10,000 years ago, everybody was a hunter-gatherer around the world, and then they formed villages, and then they formed towns and agriculture and cities, and now we have the internet. But it's more likely that there were civilizations that rose and fell. And there, of course, there are biblical accounts of that, and there appear in the small bits of the Bible that I have read, it does appear that there were advanced forms of technology in the past, but the people who wrote about them didn't understand what they were, so they had to come up with analogies, like the walls of Jericho. The walls of Jericho were destroyed. It wasn't by trumpets, but it may have been something that looked like trumpets. The Ark of the Covenant was obviously an advanced piece of technology that could kill people, and yet there are disputes as to where that is located. Some people say it's in Ethiopia. Some people say it's still under Temple Mount. I can easily believe that things like that did exist, and were given not necessarily as gifts, but as instruments to be used. And the classic story of the fallen angels. They supposedly made a trade. They wanted the women of Earth, and in order to get that, it's like, what do we get? Well, here, we'll give you technology. Oh, gee, thank you. So yeah, it's a fascinating story.
So what do you think is the case? Because if the Nephilims because the Bible actually says that they were there then and also after. Okay.
Yeah.
So that being the case, they would still be around today, and they would still be teaching men today. Going back to one of the things that I said earlier, the fact that growing up in school, they will show you pictures of dinosaurs, and you'll have the whole range of dinosaurs, and they'll show you bones. And if you go into a lot of museums, not only here but I'm sure in the States and probably in Peru, you will see all these massive dinosaur bones that they found, pieces of bones, and put it together, and here you are, you've got a whole dinosaur. Why do you think that the information on these lost civilizations and the bones and the skulls of these people is not widely accessible?
I think there's an agenda, and I agree actually with LA that it's a Darwinian agenda. Because I spent 4 years studying Darwinian evolution to get my biological degree from university. And I didn't buy I bought the idea that evolution can exist, that you have natural selection that goes on because if an environment changes, one species dies out, another one takes over. But I never bought the whole thing hook, line, and sinker. So I think it's Darwinists who are controlling history. And if you suddenly come up with humanoid life forms that don't fit in with their story of everybody coming from monkeys, then they get threatened. But that's clearly what's going on, is that there were other forms of humanoid life that did exist, and we basically killed them off. For example, the Florensis Hobbit people that lived in Indonesia, the Neanderthal were likely wiped out by us, and another subspecies called Denisovan were likely wiped out by us as well. We're a very destructive species, so I'm sure there are others which have been found, and the evidence has been hidden away, like the giants of North America, or the giants of the Middle East, the giants of England, the giants all over the world kind of thing. All of those specimens have been hidden away because they don't fit a specific worldview that a small group of people want to maintain, but that's falling apart.
Interesting. Because for me, I'm just seeing a lot of things unravel in terms of even this ship that Noah built has been found, and the guys have actually dug into the ship and found the actual, the food that these animals would have eaten on the journey, when there was the whole flooding and everything. And the measurements of the ship is, because in the Old Testament, God actually gives the measurement of how the ship should be built down to the last millimeter. And the ship that they found, I can't remember, I think it's in Turkey somewhere that they found it on a mountain somewhere, and it's actually, as the shape of an actual ship. And when they dug into it, that's where they started to see the whole building structure. I don't know if you've actually seen that. But again, this is not something which is sort of like pushed in the public. Like if they was to find a new species of, a plant or another dinosaur, it's not been pushed in the public. And for me, it's coming to, to me, I ask the question, well, all of these things is written in the Bible, but they're not, and when they're actually being found, they're not being publicized. I'm not too sure why that is. Well, I do. I've got an inkling, yeah. But each one to their own, isn't it? You can make up your own conclusion to that. But have you seen that? Have you actually saw the documentary on the actual ship that they found?
Yeah. Not that one specifically, but there have been people for decades who have taken photographs of what looks like a ship on Mount Ararat. And the different governments control, again, you're in a very politically unstable part of the world, so it's like, can I have permission? No.
Yeah.
That happens over and over, especially in that area more than anywhere else, I think, on Earth. It's just, there's so much history, but there's also so much control of history. But with the internet, with satellite imaging, with all these new technologies, nobody can control the information anymore because it's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where a lot of people starting to wake up to a lot of things, you know, things that you've been researching, you're sharing with the world, what LA's been doing, and it's there, you know. So in terms of the technology that we have now for the you know, how we can spread information so fast around the world, that is brilliant. But anyway, Brien, for me, I'm sort of I'm out of sort of questions. I don't know if you've got anything that you would like to throw into the actual picture, because it's been eye opening anyway. At least, you know, hearing some of the things that you found and some of the things that I'm sure you're going to go on to find. So, if there's anything you'd like to share with us, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Well, I think that it's not a new thing that history has been controlled or altered or manipulated. It's been going on for thousands of years. It's a power thing. But now, due to the fact that we have the internet, etc., we're able to figure out who's pulling the strings, and in that way we can start changing our future ourselves. Because you see the banking system breaking down, governments are breaking down, some belief systems are breaking down, being questioned, and history is starting to fall apart. Because with the introduction of science into it, then all of a sudden you have solid evidence that some of these things did exist.
Sure.
Of course, everyone's been trying to find the grave of Jesus, you know, et cetera, in order to state emphatically that he existed. I hope that is found. I hope that a lot of the biblical.
I think it is. I think it was found. It has been found.
I haven't seen any conclusive evidence yet, but I think it would be good if a lot of biblical accounts were backed up by scientific data. That way, you can say this was a truly historical fact based on science. So yeah, I think the future is quite exciting because there's so many millions of people now looking and questioning that together as a society we can start to put history back together again.
Absolutely. And on that point, you know, I think that's a great way to end it, because the truth is the history we thought we knew is now being rewritten again. And this time, hopefully it's going to be rewritten with facts rather than deception and, you know, other people's ideologies.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much for being on the show with us, Brien. And, you know, please do remind us of some of the places that we can get some of your products and anything that you've got coming up in the future, so our listeners can sort of, you know, be prepared for what you have.
Sure. Again, my website is www.hiddenintours.com, but it's not just about tours. It contains links to 850 of my YouTube videos, my books, different researchers' work, etc. So it's actually a huge database of information. The tour.
Great. Well, you know, the tour sounds interesting, so I may just well come and join you on one of those tours, yeah? We'll keep in touch and you let me know when you've got one coming up. But it's been a pleasure, sir, and I would love to have you back on the show again sometime in the future, maybe when you've got a new book or new DVD that you've got coming out, so we can then talk about it and share it with all our listeners. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure for me. Thank you.
All right. Take care now, Brien. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Okay, cheers.
Okay. All right. So we've got that going, guys. That has been... Hey, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please do go ahead and subscribe. The subscribe button should be on the right. Share, comment and like. Especially give it a thumbs up if you really enjoyed it. Guys, we've got tons more videos just like this, and you'll find another free video just underneath, just about there. Okay, so you can go ahead and click on any one of those videos and enjoy as many as you want, guys. Alright, but please do remember to like, subscribe and please do share. Take care now. See you in the next video. Bye bye.